Hi, welcome back to PC Builder. I'm Jason. The Ryzen 5 7600 and Ryzen 5 7600X are currently the best price to performance CPUs in the mid-range and even higher end gaming builds, especially given how far DDR5 RAM and AM5 motherboard prices have fallen. So today we're going to cover everything that you need to know, including comparing the Ryzen 7600X versus the 7600, the best motherboard for Ryzen 7600, the best RAM for Ryzen 7600, best graphics card for Ryzen 7600, and more. We'll also take our Ryzen 5 7600 build head to head against both the i5 13600K and the Ryzen 7700 with a couple of sample builds at different budgets to see which one is the best gaming PC build in 2023. Remember, if you get value out of the video, give it a like because it makes a huge difference for the channel, and of course subscribe and click that bell icon. That way you get notified when we release cool content. Let's jump into it. This video is sponsored by Squarespace, giving you a powerful online platform to create your own website. It's easy to get started with Squarespace's professional website templates with designs for every category and use case. Then simply customize your look, update content, and add features to fit your needs. Sell your products online, from services to physical and even digital products. And Squarespace makes checkout seamless for your customers using credit cards, Apple Pay, PayPal, and more. Visit squarespace.com/PCBuilder to sign up for a free trial and get 10% off your first purchase. Let's start with the Ryzen 7600X versus the Ryzen 7600 Non-X. They're usually about the same price. Right now you can pick one up for between $215 and $230 US. The Ryzen 7600 comes with an included Ray Stealth cooler, whereas the Ryzen 5 7600X, it doesn't, but I'm gonna recommend that you replace it anyway when we discuss the best coolers for Ryzen 7600. The only real difference is that the Ryzen 7600 is set to run at a 65 watt TDP rather than the 105 watt TDP of the 7600X. But even at the lower TDP, the gaming performance of the Ryzen 7600, it's only 3% less than the 7600X at 1080p using an RTX 4090. Now remember, as we go up in resolution or down in GPU power, we become more GPU limited and less CPU limited. So essentially they perform equally. And you can always turn on Precision Boost Overdrive on the Ryzen 7600 and it will perform within about 1% of the 7600X, whether or not PBO is turned on. The big difference is actually in power usage, where the Ryzen 7600, it uses 10% less energy than the 7600X, whether or not you turn on Precision Boost Overdrive. We'll talk more about the differences in the best cooler section, but honestly, there is little compelling difference between these two. So how does the Ryzen 7600 stack up to its closest competitors? In gaming, it is among the fastest gaming CPUs on the market, even using an RTX 4090 at 1080p. The Ryzen 7600 with PBO enabled is over 30% faster than the Ryzen 5600X or the i5 12400, making it excellent to pair with a mid-range or higher end GPU. The Ryzen 7600, it's also 3% faster than either the Ryzen 5800X 3D or a DDR5 equipped i5 13600K. For faster CPUs, the Ryzen 7700X comes in just 5% faster. A DDR5 equipped i7 13700K is just 9% faster, and the Ryzen 7 7800X 3D is 16% faster. Again, if we go up in resolution or down in GPU power, those differences shrink. For multi-threaded production work, most users will not notice the difference between any of these CPUs because they are super fast. The Ryzen 7600 performs similarly to a Ryzen 7 5800X. If you are a professional who needs their PC to run heavy multi-threaded applications on a regular basis, then consider stepping up to the Ryzen 7700, which is 30% faster in Cinebench R23 multi-core score, or do check out our i5 13600K Best PC Build Guide, as it's over 50% faster than the Ryzen 7600 in Cinebench R23 multi-core. I'll leave links to all of these CPUs in the video description so you can check out current pricing and availability in your region. If you are just gaming, the price to performance of the Ryzen 7600 is insane, and spending the extra money on getting a faster GPU will net us way more FPS than simply jumping up to the next fastest CPU. That is, until we max out our GPU. So what's the best GPU for the Ryzen 7600? Remember, we get way more FPS in a gaming PC build when we get the fastest GPU that we can afford, and then we simply get a CPU that's just not going to bottleneck it. Right now, the price difference between the Ryzen 5600 and Ryzen 7600 it's about $100. And of course, there are price differences for RAM as well. That's easily enough to jump up a GPU tier. So the lowest GPU that I would pair with a Ryzen 7600 is a Radeon RX 6700 XT or RTX 4060 Ti. Anything lower than that, and I'd likely drop down to a cheaper CPU and use the savings to jump up to a higher GPU tier. But those CPUs tend to run into a bit of a wall around the RX 6950 XT or RTX 4070. Remember that NVIDIA GPUs use more CPU resources than Radeon ones. So if buying a GPU in that range or faster, I definitely want the Ryzen 7600 instead. The good news is that given how fast the Ryzen 7600 is, you can take it all the way up to a Radeon RX 7900 XTX or even RTX 4090. Though at that point, if you do have extra money, I'd invest it in faster CPU. I'll leave the current GPUs that I would get linked down in the video description so you can check out current pricing and availability in your region. Remember that the AM5 platform will have future upgrades available in Zen 5 and possibly Zen 6 CPUs. So this early in the life of AM5, I'd be more willing to max out my GPU before I spent much more upping my CPU, as the next gen CPUs will likely be considerably faster. So what's the best RAM for the Ryzen 7600? DDR5 prices have fallen significantly since the introduction of Ryzen 7000. But no standard DDR5 speeds have emerged yet, the way that 3200 CL16 or 3600 CL16 were standard speeds for DDR4. Now the overall speed of the kit, it depends both on that first number, the mega transfers, but often called megahertz mistakenly, even though it's technically incorrect. And then the second number, which is the CAS latency. Basically, we want the speed to be as fast as possible in mega transfers while having the lowest CAS latency possible. There is one other important limitation, of course, and that's the platform itself. While AMD has recommended 6000 speed RAM, many Ryzen 7000 CPUs have trouble posting at the 6000 speed on more affordable B650 motherboards, with 5600 seemingly being the safe speed to get. Now in testing, we don't see much of a difference between ultra-fast DDR5 6000 CL30 kits and DDR5 5600 CL36 or faster kits. It's really just about 5 or 6%. Given the current pricing of DDR5, it's about $90 for a 2x16GB kit, so 32 gigabytes total. DDR5 5600 CL32, that's what I'd be targeting. But if that's too expensive in your market, then 5600 CL36 is fine as well. 5600 CL30 and even CL28 kits can be found for about $110 or $120, and you'll see a small FPS increase with them. Just remember that your money is best spent on increasing the GPU rather than the RAM. But I do expect RAM prices are going to continue to fall, so certainly pick up one of the faster kits if the price difference continues to shrink. I'll leave links to some kits of different speeds in the video description so you can check out the current pricing. What about Intel XMP versus AMD EXPO RAM profile? All DDR5 RAM, it's designed to be overclocked either using an Intel XMP or AMD EXPO profile, or you can overclock it yourself manually, which I don't recommend. Now that's why we always ignore the non-overclocked RAM speeds listed in the motherboard and the CPU specs. Those are standard speeds and everyone is going to overclock at least by turning on XMP or EXPO in the BIOS. Check out our How to Set Up a PC guide for more. So far, all the AM5 motherboards support both Intel XMP and AMD EXPO profiles, and there is zero gaming difference found in testing between the two, so honestly, don't worry about which one you get, just get one. Just make sure to turn it on in the BIOS and get the full rated speed. In terms of whether to get a 2x8GB kit versus 2x16GB, well, there used to be a significant price difference between the two to the point that I would recommend getting the 2x8GB kits. Honestly, it's no longer the case. Right now, the price difference is about $10 between getting a similar speed DDR5 kits at 16GB and 32GB total capacity, so it's a no-brainer to get 32GB. Now, 32GB, it's a lot of RAM for all but specific professional users doing production tasks at professional levels. So don't waste money on getting more than that. So what's the best motherboard for the Ryzen 7600? The good news is that we can expect more generations of CPUs that will use the same AM5 motherboard, so you'll be able to drop in upgrades sometime in the future. The bad news? All the crazy chipsets. From A620 to B650 to B650E to X670 to X670E, it's extremely confusing. So here's the easy version. You're looking to get a B650 or B650E motherboard. It does not matter between those two. A620 motherboards would be nice, except they don't allow the use of AMD's Precision Boost Overdrive. Really dumb if you ask me, which makes them totally pointless as there are now cheaper B650 motherboards for almost the same price. X670 and X670E motherboards do not offer any useful features over and above B650. No consumer needs PCIe Gen 5 SSDs, more on that coming up. And frankly, I'm not even sure why X670 motherboards exist, except to squeeze more money out of unsuspecting buyers. We cover more on this in our best motherboards for Ryzen 7000, and we'll also cover it in our upcoming Best Ryzen Motherboard 2023 video, which I'll leave linked down in the description if you want a deeper dive. So what B650 motherboard should you get? Right now, there are budget tier motherboards which offer most of the features that gamers want, except for improved audio, and they range between $125 and $170. Then we have the boards that also include improved audio, but not much else other than maybe they look a little nicer, but they start around $220 to $250. Now I'm hopeful this will change, but looking at the market right now, I can't recommend you spend an extra $100 just to upgrade the onboard audio, when for about the same price difference, you can get an internal sound card or external digital to analog converter called a DAC and get even better audio instead. So my recommendation is to pick up a great budget motherboard like the Gigabyte B650 DS3H for $140, the ASRock B650 HTV for $125, or a nicer looking PG Riptide for $150, or the Pro 4 for about $140. ASUS's entry-level boards are mostly heavily cut down, but if you're someone who absolutely has to have ASUS, consider the B650 Prime. Right now, most MSI and ASUS boards are heavily overpriced, but the MSI B650 Pro-P is a decent motherboard. If you do want to spend the extra money and get a board with improved audio, after all, you might have this board through several different CPU upgrades, then here's the ones that I would take a look at. From MSI, the B650 Mortar, Tomahawk, or Edge Wi-Fi for about $240 are great picks. From Gigabyte, the B650 Aorus Pro AX or Aero for about $240 to $250. Note the Aorus Elite does not have improved audio on it. And from ASUS, their Tough Gaming B650 Plus for about $240. ASRock doesn't really have anything with improved audio except for their relatively expensive Taichi motherboard. I'll leave links to the motherboards that I would recommend in the video description below, and you can check out current pricing and availability. Now let's talk about the best CPU cooler for the Ryzen 7600. When Ryzen 7000 first released, many reviewers freaked out at the higher operating temperatures. The good news is that despite the fact that the Ryzen 7000 CPUs target a maximum thermal temperature of 95 degrees Celsius, that's only in sustained multi-threaded workloads under full load, not gaming. In gaming, the Ryzen 7600 should run much cooler and require less cooling, though the more cooling you give it, the more you can increase performance. You can also adjust the maximum operating temperature in the BIOS, so if that bothers you, my advice is just to lower it to something like 89C or get the Ryzen 7600 and leave Precision Boost Overdrive off. You can also enable Eco Mode on the Ryzen 7600X, which gives you about 95% of the performance for much lower power usage and cooling requirements. Whether you go full performance or Eco Mode, I would honestly replace the Ray Stealth cooler if you get the Ryzen 7600. At a minimum, I would look for a high performance tower air cooler like the Deepcool AK400 for about $30. Some of the cheaper single tower coolers are also fine too, like the Thermalright Assassin King with 5 heat pipes and ARGB for just $20. But I think a reasonable alternative for either situation is going with a 6 heat pipe cooler with 1 or 2 towers and fans like the Deepcool AK500, Thermalright Peerless Assassin 120, or SE226 XT for around $45. For those looking to even out their temperature spikes while gaming or just bling up their system, consider a 240mm all-in-one liquid cooler like the Deepcool LS520 SE for just $89. I'll leave links to these coolers and some other suggestions down in the video description. One quick note on AM4 to AM5 cooler compatibility. AM4 coolers will fit on an AM5 motherboard as long as you do not need to replace the stock motherboard backplate, because on AM5 you cannot remove it like you could with AM4. Now most cooler companies by now will list whether their cooler is AM5 compatible, so this really shouldn't be an issue. Let's talk about the best SSD for the Ryzen 7600. Now if you haven't had a chance to check out our best SSD for gaming 2023 video, I'll leave a link to it down in the video description for a deeper dive. But basically, there's no current gaming benefit from using anything faster than even a SATA SSD. Of course, PCIe Gen 3 and Gen 4 M.2 NVMe drives are now cheaper than SATA SSDs, and there's no fuss with cable management, so that's what we're focusing on. There are a number of great budget M.2 NVMe SSDs like the Silicon Power A60, the Team Group MP33, and other budget drives. If you want something with a DRAM cache, the Crucial P3 Plus or Silicon Power A80 are excellent options that won't break the bank. Right now, the best price to storage capacity is at the 2 terabyte level, where you can find drives for between $65 and $90. I'll leave links to a couple in the video description, and my advice, just get the cheapest one. So what's a great PC case for a Ryzen 7600 build? Well, for the PC case, what we're looking for here is good airflow at an affordable mid-range price. I really like the Deepcool CK560, which comes with 3 included ARGB fans, 1 non-RGB rear fan for just $89. We built our Ryzen 5800X 3D gaming build in it, and it was awesome. I also really like the Lian Li Landcool 216 with its 160mm front ARGB fans for about $110. We did our Ryzen 7800X 3D build in this case, and I absolutely loved it. In this price range, the Fractal Pop Air, both the ATX and Micro ATX size cases, are great values with included ARGB fans, front mesh for between $70 and $90. Antec also has some recent entries into this price range that I really like, such as the DF700 Flux, which comes in black or white with 5 included ARGB fans for right around $100 US. And their Antec NX410 is another great ARGB option with 3 fans for between $70 and $80. I'll leave a list of great value cases down in the video description below, and you can check out pricing and availability in your region. Let's do some quick comparison builds: 7600 budget build, a premium build, an upgrade to a 7700, and then let's compare it against the i5 13600K. I'm just including the components in the builds. They're actually going to change, so no case, nothing else, no drives or anything, but we are including the Sapphire RX 7900 XT GPU without the price in there, just for the overall power draw, because these are going to require different levels of power supplies because the 13600K, unfortunately, and 7700 draw more power. Starting off with the 7600, right now selling for about $210. We're going to pair that with a Deepcool AK400 for the cooler, $35, very performative CPU cooler, especially for the 7600. And we're going to go with a budget tier motherboard, Gigabyte B650M DS3H, currently selling for $150, although you can get cheaper motherboards. The motherboard you just saw was on sale for $140 when I grabbed it. You can also buy the HDV ASRock B650M for about $125 in the US. For the RAM, I just kind of picked a middle of the road kit here, DDR5 5600 CL32 for $85, 32 gigs for about $10 or $15 more. You can, of course, get slightly faster RAM as well, but we're just going budget on this build. And then for the power supply, because we only need about 800 watts or so for this, we went with a Fantex Revolt Pro 850. This is gold certified unit, $109 right now over at Newegg. All told, $589 for the build. Remember, that doesn't include the cost of the GPU, the case, or whatever storage you're going to use, but that's a pretty good start. $589 to get you a mid-tier or higher level performing PC. If we compare that to the 13600K budget build, remember, you need DDR5, faster DDR5 to get similar performance to the Ryzen 7600. So that's what we've done here. We went with the i5 13600KF, $292. Has come down a little bit in recent months. You often find it selling for just a little bit less, but $292 is about an average price for it. And remember, that's the KF, not the K. This does not have the integrated graphics. So if you are doing video editing type of work, you probably want to spend another $20 and get the K instead. We're going to cool that with the Deepcool AK500, perfectly adequate CPU cooler, about $45 right now over at Newegg. You get Thermalright Peerless Assassin 120, the 2-tower cooler, also really good here for about the same price. Remember, you're going to need a Z690 motherboard that has BIOS flashback on it, or you're going to need a Z790 motherboard for 13th gen. Here I went with the ASRock Z790 PG Lightning, simply the cheapest alternative right now. That's why it's a great motherboard, though, for only $180 if you don't want the upgraded audio. For the RAM, I just went with the cheapest DDR5 6400 CL32 kit I could find for $110. That's what I would advocate you go for as well in terms of the overall speeds. We're using that same GPU GPU, the 7900 XT, just for the power usage, no actual cost. And then we're gonna finish out, we definitely need about 1,000 watts of power for this thing. So we finished out with the Gigabyte UD 1000 GM. Very, very good power supply, 1000 watt unit for about $140. All told, $769. Obviously quite a bit more expensive than our 7600 build. And honestly, remember, this is still gonna lose out to the 7600 by about 3%. If we are looking for a more premium Ryzen 7600, really the only big changes here is we've upgraded the motherboard to one that has upgraded audio. In this case, the MSI B650 Edge Wi-Fi, really, really good motherboard, $240. That's about what you're gonna spend, anywhere from $220 up to $260 for that upgraded audio and all the other upgraded features. I do really like this motherboard. Same cooler, but we are gonna upgrade the RAM to a 32 gigabyte 2x16 DDR5 5600 CL28. So this is super tight, super fast timings right now for $100. You can get an RGB kit of this for about $15 to $20 more if you want to go RGB. Similar power draw, so for $695, we've just basically premiumized out our whole system. Remember, we're not including the cost of the GPU, the case, or the storage in this. If we go with a slightly more premium 13600K build, what really changes here? It's mostly the motherboard. You're just going to add in another $50 or $60 for motherboard like the MAG Z690 Tomahawk that does have BIOS flashback on it and has upgraded audio. Overall, really, really nice motherboard. But again, we can see the total cost of the build, $820. So it does come in about $120, almost $130 more expensive than our 7600 premium system. If instead we look at going with a Ryzen 7700 premium system, really the only change here is the 7700. Now, if you can get the 7700 non-X, it does come with a decent-ish cooler. I still would recommend probably replacing it if you're going to turn on Precision Boost Overdrive and really push that CPU. So I went here with the Deepcool AK500. Obviously, the 7700X does not come with an included CPU cooler. The CPU itself, quite a bit more expensive. Then you add in the cost of additional for the cooler. Overall, we come out to $806. Again, about $120 more than the Ryzen 7600 premium system. And for another $120, you get really close to buying a 7900 XTX GPU instead of the XT. To me, yeah, I'd find the extra money and go with the XTX instead and the 7600. That's where you're going to get more FPS. Check out the link to our sponsor Squarespace for a free trial and 10% off your first purchase. Remember, links for everything are down in the video description, so check those out. And if you got value out of the video, give it a like because it makes a huge difference to the channel. And of course, subscribe and click that bell icon. That way you get notified when we release cool content. Hope you have fun building your Ryzen 7600 gaming build, and we'll catch you on the next one.